The morning started like any other. I woke up to the soft hum of birds outside my window, the kind of peaceful sound that usually makes you feel safe. But that day, something was off. I rolled out of bed, stretched, and headed outside to check on my Jeep, the one thing I trusted to be exactly where I left it. But it wasn't there. Instead, all I saw was an empty patch of gravel where my Jeep had been parked the night before. My heart dropped. I blinked, thinking maybe I was still half asleep, that this was some cruel trick my mind was playing. But no. The lock that secured my Jeep's gate was cut clean through. The metal snapped like a twig. I could almost hear the sharp snap echoing in my head, the sound of something precious being ripped away. The lock, the Jeep, my peace of mind, all gone. Have you ever felt completely powerless in your own home? Like the ground beneath you just vanished? That's exactly how I felt standing there, staring at the empty space. The Jeep wasn't just a vehicle. It was a symbol of everything I'd worked for. My family's legacy, my service, my pride. And now, it was gone. I ran my fingers over the jagged edges of the broken lock, the cold metal biting into my skin. My mind raced. Who would do this? Why? And most importantly, where was my Jeep? I called out to my neighbors, but no one had seen a thing. The silence around me was deafening. It was like the whole neighborhood was holding its breath, waiting for what would come next. And that's when the fear really set in. Because this wasn't just some random theft. Whoever took my Jeep didn't know what they were messing with. Wait till you see what happens next. You won't believe who took it. But before I get ahead of myself, let me take you back to why this Jeep meant so much more than just metal and wheels. Because this story isn't just about a stolen vehicle. It's about standing up to hoes who think they can control everything, even your own life. And trust me, you're going to want to hear every detail. This Jeep isn't just a vehicle to me. It's a rolling piece of my family's history, a symbol of everything I've fought for and everything I stand for. When I first got it, it was more than just a set of wheels. It was a promise to protect, to serve, and to keep my community safe. You see, this Jeep was part of a police task force, a specialized unit that I was proud to be a part of. It wasn't flashy or new, but it was reliable, rugged, and ready for anything. Every scratch, every dent told a story of late-night patrols, of chasing down bad actors, and of standing guard when others couldn't. But beyond the job, this Jeep was a family heirloom of sorts. My father, a veteran himself, had passed it down to me. He believed in service, in community, and in standing up for what's right. He used to say, "This Jeep isn't just metal, it's a shield for the people." And I carried that with me every day. It was more than transportation. It was a symbol of legacy, of sacrifice, and of the values that shaped me. When I looked at that Jeep, I saw my family's history, my own commitment, and the trust my community placed in me. That's why losing it felt like losing a part of myself. Now, contrast that with the HOA, the homeowners association that's supposed to keep our neighborhood orderly, but instead thrives on petty rules and control. They don't see the bigger picture. To them, it's just a vehicle parked wrong or a lock that needs to be cut. They don't understand the sacrifices behind it, the late nights, the service, the legacy. Their world is about control, about power, about enforcing rules without heart or understanding. And that's where the real conflict began. Because while I'm out there protecting and serving, they're busy policing arcing spots and cutting locks. It's a clash of values, community and service versus bureaucracy and entitlement. And that clash, It's about to explode. But before it does, you need to understand just how deep this connection runs. Why this Jeep isn't just a car, but a lifeline, a legacy, and a symbol of everything worth fighting for. So stick with me. The story's just getting started. The tension started small. Just a few notes slipped under my door, warnings about parking violations. At first, I thought it was a mistake. After all, my Jeep was parked legally on my own property, but then the notes kept coming, each one more aggressive than the last. And at the center of it all was her, the HOA president, the neighborhood Karen. She wasn't just enforcing rules, she was wielding them like a weapon. Every interaction with her felt like walking into a storm, her voice sharp, her tone condescending, as if she owned the place and everyone in it. She'd send emails demanding I move the Jeep, claiming it was against community standards. I tried to reason with her, explaining the Jeep's role in the police task force, the legacy behind it. But she didn't want to hear it. To her, rules were rules, and no exceptions were allowed. It wasn't just about the Jeep anymore. It was about control, about power, about showing who was boss. I remember one meeting where she stood in front of the board, arms crossed, eyes cold. "We can't have vehicles like that parked here," she said. "It sets a bad example." I wanted to shout, to tell her what that Jeep really meant, but the room was silent, the board nodding along like obedient sheep. That's when I realized this wasn't just a disagreement. It was a battle, and the warnings, they were just the beginning. I started to notice other neighbors whispering, some siding with the HOA out of fear, others quietly supporting me but too scared to speak up. The neighborhood was splitting, and the Karen was at the center, pushing her agenda with ruthless determination. What would she do next? Ut the lock? Tow the Jeep? The uncertainty gnawed at me. Every day, I wondered if I'd come home to find the Jeep gone. And deep down, I knew this fight was far from over. But I wasn't about to back down, not when so much was at stake. And that's when things took a turn I never saw coming. I still remember the exact moment I realized the Jeep was gone. I stepped outside, expecting to see it parked right where it always was, ready for the day ahead. But instead, there was nothing, just an empty space where my Jeep had been for years. At first, I thought maybe it had been towed. Some mistake, some bureaucratic error, but no towing notice, no calls, no explanation, just silence. My heart sank. The lock on the gate was cut clean through, the jagged edges still fresh. Whoever did this didn't just want to send a message. They wanted to take it all. And my mind immediately went to one person, the HOA president, the Karen who had been pushing this war from day one. It was too convenient, too calculated. But what shocked me even more was what I started uncovering next. Behind the polished emails and official letters, there was something darker, a web of corruption and abuse of power within the HOA. I found whispers of secret meetings, backroom deals, and fines levied unfairly against neighbors who dared to speak up. The HOA wasn't just enforcing rules. They were weaponizing them to control, intimidate, and silence. Meanwhile, I was left standing in the cold, frustrated and powerless, while the HOA's cold bureaucracy moved like a well-oiled machine, indifferent to the damage they caused. It was a stark contrast, my desperation and outrage against their calculated, emotionless tactics. And as I dug deeper, I realized this wasn't just about a Jeep anymore. It was about exposing a system that had gone too far. But how do you fight an enemy that hides behind rules and paperwork? That question haunted me as the story took a turn I never expected. Because what I was about to discover would change everything. I knew I couldn't fight this battle alone. The HOA's grip was tight, their power backed by rules most of us barely understood. So, I started knocking on doors, talking to neighbors, the people who, like me, felt the weight of the HOA's heavy hand but were too afraid or unsure to speak up. Slowly, the walls began to crumble. People shared their own stories of unfair fines, secret meetings, and rules that seemed designed to confuse rather than protect. We weren't just isolated victims. We were a community under siege. Together, we started digging. I managed to get my hands on HOA meeting minutes, pages filled with vague language, hidden agendas, and decisions made without proper notice. There were secret rules buried deep in the bylaws, rules that gave the HOA board unchecked power to enforce penalties without due process. Here's something many don't realize. HOAs operate under state laws, but those laws vary widely, and many boards exploit loopholes to push their own agendas. For example, in some states, an HOA can't just seize property without a court order. Yet here, the HOA seemed to act like judge, jury, and executioner. We found that the HOA had been ignoring basic legal requirements like proper notification and fair hearings. That meant their actions, including cutting my lock and taking my Jeep, could be challenged legally. This discovery sparked hope. We weren't powerless after all. We had rights, and we had each other. Neighbors who had been silent started speaking up. We formed a group, sharing information, pooling resources, and planning our next moves. It was more than just fighting for my Jeep now. It was about reclaiming our community, standing up to abuse, and making sure no one else would suffer the same fate. The power of a united neighborhood is something the HOA hadn't counted on. And as we prepared to take the next step, I realized this fight was bigger than me. It was about all of us. But the HOA wasn't going to give up without a fight. What came next tested us all in ways we never expected. Just when we thought gaining ground would make the HOA back off, they doubled down. The moment they realized we were organizing, their tactics shifted from subtle to outright aggressive. Threatening letters arrived, filled with legal jargon designed to intimidate. Fines piled up faster than I could keep track of. Hundreds, then thousands of dollars, all for violations that seemed made up on the spot. The HOA wasn't just enforcing rules anymore. They were weaponizing fear. But it wasn't just the money. The social pressure was suffocating. Neighbors who once nodded in support suddenly avoided me, afraid of being targeted themselves. Rumors spread, painting me as the troublemaker, the one stirring up conflict in a peaceful community. At home, the tension was unbearable. My family felt the strain. Late-night phone calls, whispered worries, and the constant fear that this fight might cost us everything. My kids asked why people were angry with me, and I had no easy answers. The emotional toll was crushing. I was exhausted, frustrated, and scared. But giving up wasn't an option, not when the stakes were this high. The HOA's president, the Karen, seemed to relish every moment of it, her cold smile hiding the satisfaction of watching me struggle. She wasn't just a bureaucrat enforcing rules. She was a villain who thrived on control and intimidation. Every threat, every fine, every whispered rumor was a calculated move to break me down. But I knew that if I let fear win, the HOA would have won too. So I held on, steeling myself for the battle ahead. Because this fight wasn't just about a Jeep anymore. It was about standing up to bullies who think they can silence anyone who dares to challenge them. And I wasn't about to be silenced. Just when the pressure felt unbearable, the tide suddenly turned. And it all came down to one crucial fact the HOA had completely overlooked. The Jeep wasn't just any vehicle, it belonged to a police task force, a specialized unit I was part of, working to keep our community safe. This wasn't just a personal asset, it was government property, tied to law enforcement and protected by laws the HOA had no right to ignore. When I revealed this to the HOA board, their confident smirks vanished. Suddenly, the petty rules and threats felt meaningless against the weight of authority backing me up. I brought in legal counsel, experts who knew HOA law inside and out, and they confirmed what I suspected. The HOA had overstepped, violated state statutes, and risked serious consequences by seizing government property without proper cause or process. This revelation was a game changer. The power dynamic shifted overnight. The HOA, once so sure of their control, now faced real accountability. But the best part? This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about setting a precedent, showing that no HOA, no matter how entitled, could bully their way past the law. The secret weapon wasn't just the law itself, but the community standing behind it, ready to fight back with facts, authority, and unity. And as the HOA scrambled to cover their tracks, I knew the showdown was coming. Because once the truth was out, there was no turning back. Wait till you see how it all unfolds. The confrontation, the justice, and the moment the Jeep finally came home. The day of the confrontation arrived, and I wasn't walking in alone. I had my legal team, a few neighbors who had stood by me, and the undeniable backing of the police task force. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Karen sat at the head of the table, her usual smug expression replaced by something tighter, a flicker of uncertainty. The rest of the HOA board shuffled nervously, clearly caught off guard by the force I'd brought with me. I started by laying out the facts. The broken lock, the missing Jeep, the illegal seizure of government property. I spoke calmly but firmly, each word backed by legal documents and the weight of law enforcement authority. "You've overstepped your bounds," I said, locking eyes with Karen. "This isn't about parking anymore. It's about respect for the law, for community, and for the people you're supposed to serve." Karen tried to interrupt, to deflect, but I wasn't having it. The room was silent except for my voice, steady and unwavering. One by one, neighbors shared their stories. The fines, the intimidation, the fear. The board's facade cracked under the weight of truth. Then came the moment of schadenfreude. Karen's face flushed red as the legal counsel outlined the potential consequences the HOA faced for their actions. The power she wielded so carelessly was slipping through her fingers. I could see it in her eyes, the realization that her reign of control was ending. The board voted, and the decision was unanimous. The Jeep would be returned immediately, all fines dropped, and the HOA would undergo an external review. Justice wasn't just served, it was delivered with a satisfying finality. As I walked out, the support from my neighbors was palpable. We had stood up, fought back, and won. But more than that, we had sent a message. No one, not even a Karen with a clipboard, can bully a community united by truth and justice. And this was just the beginning. The day my Jeep was returned felt like a victory not just for me, but for everyone who had stood by my side. Seeing it back in its rightful place, the familiar rumble of the engine, the worn leather seats. It was more than a vehicle coming home. It was a symbol of justice restored. But the story didn't end there. The HOA's corruption, their abuse of power, was exposed for all to see. Local news picked up the story. Neighbors who had been silent found their voices, and the community began to heal. We weren't just a neighborhood anymore. We were a united front against injustice. The petty rules and cold bureaucracy that once divided us were replaced by a renewed sense of trust and respect. For me, this fight changed everything. It tested my limits, challenged my faith in the system, but ultimately strengthened my resolve. I learned that standing up isn't easy, but it's necessary, not just for yourself, but for the community you love. The Jeep, once a target, became a beacon of hope, a reminder that even when the odds seem stacked against you, justice can prevail. And as the neighborhood moved forward, stronger and more connected, I knew this was more than a personal win. It was a victory for every homeowner who's ever felt powerless, every person who's ever faced a bully with nothing but their courage. Because in the end, community and justice go hand in hand. And that's a lesson worth remembering. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this story, it's this. As a homeowner, you have rights, and you don't have to accept bullying or abuse from an HOA or anyone else. Know your local laws, understand your property rights, and never be afraid to stand up for yourself and your community. Remember, HOAs can't just do whatever they want. They have to follow legal procedures, provide proper notices, and respect your property. If you ever find yourself facing unfair fines, intimidation, or worse, start documenting everything. Reach out to neighbors, gather evidence, and don't hesitate to seek legal advice. This fight isn't just mine, it's ours. And the more we share our stories, the stronger we become. So, if you've ever dealt with an aching HOA, a Karen with too much power, or just felt powerless in your own home, drop a comment below. Let's build a community where no one faces these battles alone. And if you want to see more stories like this, stories about standing up, fighting back, and winning justice, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Because trust me, the next story is even more unbelievable. Stay strong, stay informed, and remember, your home is your sanctuary. Fight for it.